All right, let's dive into something really interesting today. We're going to be looking at a powerful idea from a text by his witness T. Altson called The Inevitability of Ordained Growth. And it offers this really unique take on what makes success not just something that's possible, but something that's completely unavoidable. So the source text kicks off with this really compelling line. It immediately makes you stop and think, right? Who is he and what on earth did he do to become so powerful that the people around him, even their king, started to see him as a threat? Well, as the source explains, this quote is actually talking about the biblical figure Isaac, and his story is used here as a case study, really, in what overwhelming success looks like. I mean, he didn't just do okay for himself. The text says he prospered and continued to increase until he became very great and distinguished. But here's the thing. Isaac's story is really just the setup. The author uses it to introduce a much bigger principle, a universal lesson. And this is where we get to the core idea of what the text calls ordained growth. So what exactly is ordained growth? Well, according to the source, it's a very specific kind of increase. This isn't about luck or just random chance. No, it's a process that's described as inevitable, but, and this is the important part, only when very specific conditions are met. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the matter. The text makes this incredibly bold claim. When this one condition is met, growth isn't just possible or likely, it's inevitable. And that one word, it just changes the entire dynamic. So, naturally, this leads us to the most important question of all. If this growth is inevitable under a certain condition, what exactly is that condition? What does the text say you actually have to do to trigger this process? And here's where it gets really specific. The text outlines a two-part prerequisite. It all starts with a life that's fundamentally ordered by the instructions of the Lord. And then, flowing right from that foundation, comes the second part, the act of abiding by the word. These two things are presented as the direct cause, the trigger for everything that follows. Okay, so we've got the condition, but what does this growth actually feel like? How does it even happen? Well, the source is very specific about the nature of this increase. It describes it as a really distinct, unfolding process. And this chart does a great job of showing the distinction the author makes. The text says ordained growth is not forced, it unfolds. So think about it like this. On one side, you've got forced growth. That's the kind that feels strained, it relies completely on our own effort, and the result is always uncertain. But ordained growth, on the other hand, is described as this natural, unfolding process that leads to an inevitable outcome. Now, let's follow this logic all the way to its conclusion. If someone meets the condition and this natural process of growth starts to unfold, where does it all lead? What's the final destination? The text builds towards a really powerful final state. And the source doesn't present this outcome as just a possibility, a maybe. It's framed as the logical endpoint of the entire process, the one and only place this path can possibly lead. It's described as, simply, the unavoidable conclusion. And here it is. This is the climax of the entire argument. The final outcome of this unfolding, ordained growth is that greatness itself. It becomes unavoidable. It just shifts from something you pursue to something that is simply the inevitable reality of the process. So, just to quickly recap the argument from the source material, it builds in these really clear steps. It starts with Isaac as the example, then it pulls out this principle of ordained growth. It frames this growth as inevitable, but only if you abide by the word. It's a process of natural unfolding, not a forced struggle, and it all leads to this dramatic conclusion that greatness becomes an unavoidable state of being. And that really brings us to the final thought here. This text isn't framing greatness as an achievement you have to win, but as an inevitability that simply happens. So the question we want to leave you with is this. What does that distinction between achievement and inevitability, what does that really mean to you?